We are told from the very beginning that life is about the pursuit of happiness. It's written into the stories we grow up with, the songs we hum alone in our cars, the quiet expectations passed down by families without ever being said out loud. We are taught to chase it, as if happiness were a prize, waiting just beyond the next milestone, the better job, the perfect partner, the ideal version of ourselves. We're told that once we get there, we'll feel it, that elusive warmth, that peace, that finally, everything will make sense. But how often does it? How many of us have arrived, only to feel nothing at all? You land the job. You move into the apartment with sunlit windows. The room is quiet, beautiful even, and yet, something still hums beneath the surface. A quiet emptiness, a feeling that something is missing, even when everything is, on paper, complete. Why? We scroll past endless images of curated smiles. We hear voices urging us to choose happiness. We see the word plastered everywhere, like a promise. Simple, attainable, permanent, but deep down, we know happiness, as it's sold to us, feels more like a performance than a truth. And perhaps the real pain isn't that we haven't reached it. It's that we've built our entire lives around an illusion. What if happiness was never the point? What if this feeling, this emptiness, is not failure, but awakening? Albert Camus once said, "There is but one truly serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide." Beneath that unsettling line lies something deeper, not a cry of despair, but a confrontation with meaning itself. Because maybe we're not struggling because we've lost. Maybe we're struggling because we're starting to question why we're playing the game at all. We are not broken. We are not behind. We are waking up. And in that uncomfortable silence, a new question begins to whisper. If happiness isn't the goal, then what is? This isn't a guide to happiness. It never was. This is an invitation to meaning, because somewhere along the way, we confused pleasure for purpose. We began to treat happiness like a currency, to be earned, counted, flaunted. But happiness is fleeting by nature, comes and goes, like sunlight slipping between clouds. Meaning, however, lingers. Happiness asks, how do I feel in this moment? But meaning asks, what does this moment mean? In the context of my life, one is a sensation, the other, a story. And what are we, if not the stories we tell ourselves? Our culture doesn't speak much of meaning, teaches us to optimize, to succeed, to feel good fast, but it rarely tells us how to suffer with dignity, how to endure with purpose, how to find light in a season of darkness. Yet it is in those quiet, invisible hours, the heartbreak, the failures, the nights we lie awake, staring at the ceiling in doubt, that meaning is born. Psychologist Viktor Frankl, a man who survived the horrors of a concentration camp, wrote that those who have a why to live can bear almost any how. He didn't speak of happiness. He spoke of something deeper, a reason, a tether, a meaning that keeps us standing when everything else falls apart. So no, this isn't a promise that you'll walk away feeling good, but perhaps you'll walk away feeling something truer, something heavier, yes, but also more real, more enduring than joy, more sacred than comfort. Because maybe life isn't about feeling good all the time. Maybe it's about feeling alive, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. This is not a how-to guide. This is a dismantling, a questioning, a peeling back of the layers we've inherited, to look at the raw, trembling thing underneath, the search for meaning. If you listen closely, you can hear it, the whisper that follows you everywhere. Be happy, stay positive, smile more. But beneath that soft command, there is a quiet pressure, one that never really goes away. Modern society has turned happiness into something we can buy, chase, measure, and perform. It's no longer a feeling, it's a product. We scroll through picture-perfect lives, filtered joy, curated laughter, and slowly, without even realizing it, We start to feel like our own lives are missing something, not because they are, but because they weren't designed for display. This is the manufactured dream, the lie that says, if we just consume enough, fix ourselves enough, think positive enough, happiness will arrive. But it doesn't. Psychologists call it the hedonic treadmill, the way we adapt to pleasure so quickly that no achievement, no purchase, no external change ever satisfies for long. The promotion, the new phone, the vacation, it all fades, and we find ourselves running harder, faster, just to feel the same. And then there's the paradox of choice, the idea that too many options don't make us freer, but more anxious, more paralyzed, because when everything is possible, nothing feels meaningful. Add to that the pressure of toxic positivity, the cultural obsession with good vibes only, and suddenly there's no room for sadness, no room for doubt, no room for grief. We're taught to smile through the pain. But what happens when that smile cracks? We begin to feel the dissonance between what we're promised and what we actually feel, between the life we're told we should want and the quiet ache we carry inside. This isn't failure, it's clarity, because maybe the problem isn't us. Maybe it's the dream itself, a dream that was never ours to begin with, but sold to us, repackaged, mass-produced. And the moment we begin to question it is the moment we begin to wake up. Once we see through the illusion of manufactured happiness, we're left with a haunting silence and a question that echoes from the depths of time. If not happiness, then what should I live for? The answer isn't new. It's ancient, whispered by those who lived through chaos and did not turn away. Friedrich Nietzsche, a man who knew suffering intimately, gave us a radical idea. Amor, Fati, the love of fate, not the passive acceptance of what happens, but the embrace of it, even the pain, even the loss, even the mess. Amor, Fati asks us to love life as it is, not as we wish it to be, to stop resisting the current, and instead learn to swim with it, not because it's easy, but because it's real. To love fate is to stop dividing life into good or bad, fair or unfair. It is to say, this too belongs. Even the heartbreak, even the nights spent questioning everything. Then there is Viktor Frankl, a psychologist imprisoned in Auschwitz, surrounded by death, stripped of everything, family, freedom, dignity. And yet, he survived, not by chasing happiness, but by holding on to meaning. He called it the will to meaning, the belief that human beings can endure almost anything if they know why. Frankl's Logotherapy teaches that meaning isn't found by avoiding suffering, but by facing it, by making suffering speak, by allowing it to point us towards something greater, something only pain could reveal. This is not the easy path, but it is the honest one, because life, in all its complexity, won't be reduced to feel-good slogans or five-step hacks. It is wild, chaotic, beautifully unpredictable, and maybe our role is not to control it, but to honor it, all of it, not despite the suffering, but because of it. We no longer face the same monsters Nietzsche or Frankl did. We live in safer homes, longer lives, faster systems, and yet, so many of us are silently breaking. The suffering hasn't disappeared, it's just changed shape. We are drowning, not in war or famine, but in noise, in glowing screens, endless scrolls, fractured attention spans, in the quiet fatigue that comes from being constantly connected and yet never truly seen. Digital burnout, overstimulation, loneliness in a crowd. Our minds were not built to process this much, this many choices, this much comparison, this much information. Without reflection, we are overstimulated and undernourished. Our senses are fed, but our souls are starving. And the more we chase ease and comfort, the more we try to avoid discomfort, sadness, boredom, the emptier we become. We've mistaken comfort for healing, positivity for peace. But numbing is not the same as meaning. We swipe past suffering, mute the hard conversations, distract ourselves into oblivion. But the ache always returns. Late at night when the noise fades, that quiet sense that something is off, that we are off. We no longer ask ourselves the deeper questions, not because we've found the answers, but because we're afraid of what they might reveal. Who am I when I'm not performing? What matters when no one is watching? Why do I feel so alone when I'm surrounded? This is the new suffering, the silent erosion of self. In a world that never stops moving, the emptiness that grows when we trade reflection for stimulation. And perhaps the greatest irony is this: in trying to avoid pain, we've lost touch with what makes us human. Because pain, as ancient wisdom reminds us, was never the enemy. Discomfort holds meaning. Boredom breeds thought. Loneliness invites self-understanding. We weren't meant to float. We were meant to feel. Let me tell you a story. He had everything he was supposed to want: a six-figure job, in a glass building, an apartment with a skyline view, the kind of life that looks good on screens, polished, complete, enviable. Every morning, he put on his tailored suit, blended his smoothie, scrolled past headlines he didn't read. He was efficient, respected, productive, but beneath the rituals of success, there was a silence he couldn't ignore. Started small, the quiet dread before Monday, the way joy felt muted, even on weekends, the way he looked at his reflection and didn't recognize the man staring back. He had no language for it, no tragedy to explain it, nothing wrong, except that everything felt wrong. One evening, after a particularly long day filled with meetings and meaningless small talk, he came home and just sat. No music, no phone, no pretending. And for the first time in years, he let the emptiness speak. It wasn't dramatic. There was no breakdown, no tears, just a stillness and a quiet realization. He was living someone else's dream. Every goal he had chased, every standard he had met, none of it was truly his. He had built a life of shoulds, not wants, a life that looked good, but didn't feel good. That night became a beginning, not of some grand transformation, but of something softer. He started asking different questions. He spent time alone, not to escape, but to listen. He began walking without a destination, reading without a goal, feeling without running, and slowly something changed. Not overnight, not all at once, but in the small, invisible places. He began to return to himself, not the self curated for the world, but the self he had buried beneath performance. This is the wake-up call. So many of us are afraid to answer, not because we don't hear it, but because it asks us to stop running and start remembering. There comes a moment, quiet, unannounced, when the chase simply stops, not because we've won, but because we've realized the prize was never real. The idea that we must feel good all the time was never a path to peace. It was a cage with golden walls, and in that stillness, something shifts. We begin to understand maybe happiness was never meant to be the goal. Maybe it was always meant to be a byproduct of living truthfully, not comfortably, because life in its rawest form was never meant to feel good all the time. It was meant to be felt completely. The joy and the ache, the hope and the fear, the rising and the falling. We were never meant to be perfect. We were meant to be whole. And wholeness isn't about being constantly joyful. It's about being real. It's about holding grief in one hand and gratitude in the other, and learning how to carry both. We come to see that suffering, when denied, becomes poison, but when embraced, becomes a teacher. It softens the edges. It deepens the soul. It makes us gentler, more human. We no longer ask, how can I be happy? But instead, what makes this moment meaningful? How can I show up even when it hurts? There's a quiet power in that, because wholeness is not loud. It doesn't demand to be seen. It's the soft strength that rises when we stop performing, and start being. And sometimes, when we stop trying so hard to be happy, we begin to feel something better, something deeper. Not euphoria, but peace. Not a high, but a home. This is the shift, from chasing a feeling to embracing a life. Now, we return to the silence, but it feels different somehow. Not hollow, not aching, just quiet, like the breath after a long cry, or the pause before something new begins. We spoke of Nietzsche's Amor, Fati, the radical love for all that life brings. And perhaps now, it makes more sense. It's not about romanticizing pain. It's about honoring it, seeing it not as the opposite of joy, but part of its foundation. Joy is not what comes after the struggle. It's what we feel within it, when we stop resisting and start listening. And Frankl, he taught us that even in the darkest of places, we still have one freedom: to choose how we respond, to give our suffering a shape, a story, purpose. This isn't a life free from pain. It's a life that transforms it. A life that stops asking, "How do I escape this?" and starts asking, "What is this trying to teach me?" Because maybe the point was never to avoid the storm, but to find shelter within ourselves as it rages, to feel the full weight of being human and not turn away. And in that, there is a different kind of joy, not the kind that sparkles on magazine covers or glows on vacation photos, but the kind that breathes quietly beside you on a rainy morning, the kind that lingers in truth, not illusion. So let me ask you, what would you start living for if happiness wasn't the goal? What choices would you make? What would you let go of? And what would you finally allow yourself to feel? Maybe that's where meaning begins, not in the answers, but in the courage to ask better questions and to live them slowly, honestly, fully. If something in this spoke to you, if it stirred a quiet ache or a long-forgotten question, you're not alone. There are others, too, quietly walking this path. Others who are tired of pretending, tired of the chase, tired of feeling tired and not knowing why. We live in a world that's loud with advice, but quiet when it comes to meaning. A world that rewards performance, but rarely presence. That sells happiness, but forgets how to hold sadness. But here, in this quiet corner of the internet, we choose something else. Not perfection, not constant joy, but truth, depth, and the kind of beauty that only emerges when we stop running and begin to sit with ourselves. So if this journey resonated, not just in your mind, but somewhere deeper, consider staying. Not for content, but for connection. Not for quick answers, but for better questions. Subscribe if you'd like to explore meaning, not just mood. To peel back the layers, to sit in the silence, to find something more human, together. And as this video fades, let the screen dim, let the noise recede, let the stillness linger, let it echo softly, like a gentle invitation, not to chase a different life, but to come home, to the one you're already in, slowly, quietly, completely.